Our next session will discuss how engine MROs can prepare for more shop visits, deliver faster turnaround times, and cut down costs by leveraging new technology. This session is hosted by Ramco and will feature both in-person and virtual speakers to share their experience. Our moderator for today's discussion is Manoj Singh, Executive Vice President of Ramco. Please welcome Manoj and our panelists to the stage and the screen.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me loud and clear? Yes. There we go. All right. Well, we are going to talk about. So, my name is Manoj Singh, and I head Ramco's business on the aviation, aerospace, and defense side. And as all of you in the room really know, that engine MRO, amongst all the different types of flavors of MRO, is probably one of the most complex operationally compared to line, hangar, and other different types of MRO activities. So really what we wanted to do today was to go over some of those complexities operationally of those engine MRO operations, and then talk about how a software solution like Ramco addresses some of those challenges and complexities, and also talk about in real life how we have actually done and executed in solving some of those complexities. So before we get started, I believe we have our virtual panelists as well. Very good. So let me introduce very quickly our panel guests for today. I'm going to be moderating, of course. And I have Mark Bourgeono from Tsunami Solutions. I know I messed up your last name already. And so Mark is COO at Tsunami Solutions and has an illustrious career in the engine MRO world with Standard Aero in the past and Pratt and Whitney. And he brings a lot of real life nuggets in terms of what those complexities and trends are. And he's going to talk about some of those. And then I have on the virtually joining us from Spain, we have Miguel Garcia. Miguel is our senior director based out of Spain, and he is right now leading one of our largest engine MRO implementations. So he's going to provide you the real life expertise of what's going on, challenges, and how we are dealing with that. And of course, Saran, who is joining us from Chennai, India, is our subject matter expert and head of our solution advisory practice. So with that, let us get started. So before I hand it over to our panel guests and to talk about their perspectives, I wanted to sort of give you my perspective from a software solution provider's perspective in the MRO world. What are we seeing, right? Clearly, the previous panel guests, the speakers were here on the stage. They talked about the inflationary pressure that's going on in the market right now, from material, from labor perspective. So clearly, there is a need for automation and intelligence and trying to optimize to address some of those cost pressures. We're clearly seeing those, and we will talk about that in our presentation today as well. In terms of the areas where operationally our customers are starting to show signs for improvement, and they're coming to us for some of those improvements, starting with what I believe Pratt and Whitney mentioned in the previous session as well, is the digitization. At the very front end, how do you take some of these documents, manuals, how do you digitize those, and not only just digitize at the very upfront, but how do you actually make it available to your operators and your mechanics and technicians when they're actually executing those MRO activities? That's one clearly a theme that we are seeing in the market from our customers. We are also seeing clearly the need for deeper collaboration with end customers. Now, of course, you have TAT pressures and contractual obligations with your customers, but how do you collaborate with your customers on a near real-time basis, as in when you get into situations of out of scope, and hence be able to negotiate those TATs with them, revised TATs with them? And also, how do you look at TATs not just from what you have a contractual obligation with your customers, but also complete order to cash cycle of turnaround time? And Miguel is going to talk about that. And and lastly, we are seeing the need for, like I said, digitization, and followed by, how do you take it all the way to the execution of different technologies like mobile apps coming into the play and optimizing and improving the productivity of your operations. So with that, I'm going to pause because I'm really the moderator, not the speaker. So I'm going to hand it over to Mark to give his perspectives on what you're seeing, the trends and challenges in the market.
Thank you, Manoj, and I appreciate the invite to be the engine subject matter expert. So I've spent over 30 years now working in propulsion. I also run ultra marathons, so I have a high tolerance for pain. And I've worked from an OEM, engine MRO, and component repair perspective, and now I lead an engineering and IT services company at Tsunami. And so about a third of my career was actually tied to propulsion fleet management, and over half of my career I've worked in either supporting, executing, or performing in the aftermarket for propulsion. So my experiences have really taught me a couple of things. One being, if you really want to control things like safety, reliability, cost, and availability of propulsion systems, you need to have a very broad systems-based approach. And so one thing in fleet management, especially in power by the hour programs or dollar per flight hour programs, if you couldn't build the bridge between operations and hours and then cost in the shop and dollars, you didn't belong in that business. And the way to build that bridge, really two main components. The first being your IT systems and the data flow or the data value stream from operations, from flying aircraft all the way through to component repair and your labor, your material, and your repair costs. The second key element was the organizational structure. So we could talk all day about having increased visibility to data or increased efficiency in the way that that data is presented if the organization structure isn't there. So if you think through your engineering department, your operations department, your tech ops, your maintenance, if you don't have the ability to act upon what that data tells you, you can't create the level of impact in cost reduction or turnaround time reduction. So that was really my main learnings throughout that career in propulsion, particularly in the aftermarket and fleet management arena. So I've spent a fair amount of my career implementing, sponsoring activities around improving data flow, putting the information in the hands of the people who could make decisions that could then affect the reliability of the product, the turnaround time in the shop, or the cost of maintenance. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about, we'll call it engine cost reduction. And if you look on the left of the chart, what you'll see are kind of the main data elements. So I talked about building the bridge from your performance data, your on-wing data, your configuration management, all the way down through, well, how does that asset really perform on wing? And then seeing what types of maintenance events are driven, and then what is your response to that maintenance event? And it's always a labor response, a material response, a repair response, and then how much does that really cost, and what does your supply chain network really look like to achieve that outcome? For me, the big takeaway, if you want to drive the maximum cost reduction out of the system, you need to look at from on-wing to component repair, right? So what limits are you driving removals to? And there's a lot of subjectivity. I'd like to say that everything was analytically calculated, especially with new products that get fielded. But there's a lot of learning that occurs when you field a new engine, and the ability to monitor the engine's performance, adjust your limits, and really the best maintenance that you could ever perform, or the lowest cost maintenance, is not performing that maintenance at all. So how do you keep your engine on wing? When you have the opportunity to remove an engine, and I say it that way because it is an opportunity, how do you do the right thing to the product when it's in the shop, the appropriate work scope? And then how do you do that right thing for the lowest possible cost? And that would be, through smart agreements, through, collaborative agreements, incentive agreements with your supply base, understanding what needs to be done, where you should invest your efforts in internal repairs, and then all the way through to, improving your test performance, your assets performance from a call it an overall performance standpoint. So that's my view on what's really required in order to drive the maximum cost reduction through the system. I've seen in different operations teams focusing on a piece of that business, driving down the lowest cost of that component repair, or getting the lowest replacement cost for that particular part. But if it doesn't tie back to on-wing performance, if it doesn't extend your time on wing or reduce your total ownership cost, it's penny wise, pound foolish. So my experience is you do need a data value stream management approach. You need to have a good IT system that then drives that, and then you need to have the right organization that could take action. So with that, I'll just touch a bit on turn time. So my feelings on turnaround time performance is really to look at the overall system. I've been a strong proponent for sales and operations planning, or sales inventory and operations planning. We have a highly regulated, people need to be trained. We have a limited workforce, so that to the degree that you can do good planning around what your workload is going to be, get the right staff in place, running a large MRO, having the right skills and the right cells with the right understanding what your workflow is going to look like, having good insight to your past history, so you know where to focus on your turnaround time improvements, and then being able to drill down into the root cause of what drives your turnaround time to begin with. All of this visibility, right, is enabled with a good IT system, an integrated IT system throughout your MRO. And then I talk a little bit about investment in rotable pool, and I'll call it an investment, right? So understanding how the system performs for you. Those of us who have been around engines for a long time know that the high compressor is the last port to get torn down and the first one that has to go back together. So repairs in the high compressor could drive you to do some smart investments in rotable pool or localized repairs. Those are the kinds of things that you need to see from a system level, and it needs to be, in my opinion, managed, so that you get the desired outcome. So when it comes to effective turn time execution, it's really about that active management, having your goals, monitoring your flow, and then taking the right action, whether it's with your operations or your engineering department, to drive the appropriate outcomes.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon a very important topic, the rotable pools, right? And I think this is a leaf that we can borrow from, a page that we can borrow from some of the other industries, specifically on the retail side, where they have really gone deep into inventory optimization, right? Because that's what it boils down to, being able to take the demand stream coming from multiple different supplier of customers for the same set of parts, and be able to optimize the policies, inventory policies for that pool, to be able, based on the uncertainty that you see in the demand and all the supply lead time. That's what the pooling arrangement is all about, right? So being able to use a technology that can really help you with that inventory optimization of pool, and then tie that to the contract that you may have with individual customers to whom you're serving from that pool. That really defines the pooling arrangement and the technology that helps with it. So I think this may be a good time for maybe to talk to Saran, who is also on the phone on the video conference, and really talk about these things that Mark just touched: the cost aspect of it, the optimization aspect of it, the digitization and turnaround time, how that all ties to the overall end-to-end process that we have, that we see in the engine MRO, right? And then how some of these levers of transformation, digital transformation, that applies across all of these different process flows that happen in the engine MRO operation. So, Saran, would you take a few minutes and talk about these process steps and the levers of digital transformation?
Yeah, sure, Manoj. Thanks for that. So yeah, so just to add on from Mark's perspective, so our experience comes from working with some large MRO players, and what we see is okay. So the digital levers is no more a side interest, and this has become a sort of a central strategy, for propelling to the future. And the way we see the business evolve is there is an opportunity across the engine value chain, starting from engineering till the test cell, and application of right tools at the right time definitely has a higher potential to unlock the value, right? Okay, just to give some perspectives on what we have worked with our customer is, obviously engineering. Now engineering, we all know that, right? Okay, there is a huge amount of manual efforts, and then there is a significant amount of time and effort has been spent, especially processing the documents, the OEM documents, what we talk about, the ESMs, IPCs, and service bulletin. And we see that okay, a significant amount of an indirect cost can be reduced, just by having a right electronic publications tool. So what it basically does is an ability to ingest these documents in an XML, HTML format, be it an ISPEC 1000 or S1000D standards. And not only that, okay, you can also parse the content automatically to take out the bill of materials, the tools, the warnings, the cautions. And the more significant factor is it also helps an MRO organization just to add their learnings in form of customizations, right? Okay, there is a significant amount of proprietary learnings which comes in. Okay, so adding sort of an internal documents to it, adding an additional cautions, videos, etc. So basically having a customization. And the most important point here is it's not a one time effort. Okay, as the MRO builds and capability, there is a need for inducting new documents. At the same time, there is a version management. So whenever there is a version management, okay, there is a repetitive nature. So having a sort of a automated process to manage version management on the engineering side, we have seen close to around 60% reduction in a full-time equivalent of the engineering department. As we go through the process cycle, okay, so when we go to a disassembly, and then once you start that, okay, there is a high level of automation, which is can be done, because as we know that there is a high amount of data which the engine MROs generates, right? Okay, so Mark touched upon a point on the parts forecast. It's quite natural that okay, based on the work scope and the target configuration, we can arrive at what is a part forecast for a given scheduled task. But I think the most important factor is okay, is there any a way of intelligently automate what happens for a non-routine? Is there any way where I can leverage my historical data, and then using a machine learning, can I project what might be the potential non-routine, and then okay, what might be the part consumption for it, and then I can do a forecast for it, and then it detects some forward possibilities or work hole scenario. So that is one of the key area which we think okay, it can be a significant value add, especially on the execution side. And even if you do it, we all aware that okay, the shop floor scenario is dynamic. Okay, so the work scope changes, you unearth the new defects, okay, and then okay, there is a customer ask for an additional approvals. The key perspective is okay, so having a system, how far it dynamically it balance these requirements which is coming from the shop floor, and manages the constraints what you have from your resource, okay, tools, parts, etc., and then get the target objective. So when we mean the target objective, it can be two things, right? Okay, whether I want to protect the TAT because of my penalty classes, irrespective of a cost, or I can reduce the cost, and then I can be flexible on TAT, or balancing these two. So having a right scheduling and optimization tools, having this continuous feed of the data coming from the shop floor, and also having a practical perspective of what is the capacity, and then getting the right planning would be another avenue where we can significantly reduce the TAT. And obviously okay, there are an automated way where we can assign a right type of a mechanic to the right task. Okay, so based on their currencies, qualifications, skills, etc., which improves not only the productivity but also the quality of the job which we are talking about. So the third thing which we are talking about is the mobility, because that is becoming one of the key factor, especially in reducing the non-production time. So we have seen it, so almost around 60 to 70% of the time the mechanic spends on the touch labor, right? Okay, on the tools. The remaining times is spent mostly on the non-production time. So especially accessing materials or accessing the tech documents. So empowering them with the mobile solutions, we have seen a significant improvement in the production time, right? So basically what it does is, okay, having a mobile solution helps him to access the tech documents seamlessly, and it also helps him to connect with the supply chain functions, to request parts, request tools. With this current scenario, okay, so because of leveraging the technology, so there is a high amount of technical technology capability where the videos, the unstructured data, what we are talking about, the having recording the photos, recording the videos, recording the noise, the audio files, and then transmitting remotely through the engineering department and get the troubleshooting at the faster rate. So put together, if you see it, it actually reduces the TAT. At the same time, it increases the productivity of the shop floor. Okay, so that is, which is a significant value add, and an opportunity which we have seen in most of our customer places. The fourth lever which we are talking about, I think you touched upon, is on having some sort of an ecosystem, right? Okay, we are talking about a larger ecosystem for the suppliers, customers. But I think one of the key aspects from an MRO standpoint, we believe, okay, still there is a high amount of outside the system transactions, right? Okay, so there are still mails have been floating. Okay, there are calls. Okay, so there are many of the critical transactions which is happening outside the system, and obviously it is not only creating the drag on the TAT, but also you are just losing a significant amount of intelligence because you are doing a transaction outside the system. So one of the key enabler which you are talking about is there are multiple stuff. Okay, having a customer portal. Okay, and then having a sort of an interactive medium between a customer and MRO significantly reduces the transaction cost. So for example, okay, so any additional approvals required by an MRO can be immediately relied to the customer, where he can see it and then provides an approval. Or let's say, for example, even the customer at any point of the time, he doesn't need to send a mail or a call to see what is the status of his hazard in the MRO facility. At the same time, okay, any other offline communications, right, okay, which he wants to communicate to the MRO, these are all captured within the framework of an integrated system. So what it helps is, it increases a customer value proposition of an MRO, but it also helps an MRO to harness the value of the data. Even though it is structured, we can accurately find out where the delay happens, right? Okay, is a TAT delay, is it happened due to a delay in the approval by the customer, or is it an delay by internally by an MRO organization? So we can leverage the data which is coming between this layer, because it's all within the framework of the ERP system. Obviously, the finally, we are talking about an analyze stage, right? Okay, so this is again common. It is not something which is new, but I think what is significantly which we can leverage is, as the entire process is becoming a paperless operation, there is a significant amount of data which has been generated as part of the process, be it structured data, unstructured data. When I say unstructured data, the mails, the chats and all the stuff. So exactly, you can harness the data to find out real-time insights on the cost, the quality, and the TAT perspective. Add to it, okay, if you really apply machine learning and tools over it, it can also enable to suggest, even though it cannot be automated to an extent, but it can make a recommendation to have some sort of a key choice, whether you need to do an repair on exchange to meet a real TAT, or do you want to insource or an outsource. If you have a multiple suppliers, who is the best supplier to it? So this data can be harnessed even to get that intelligent visibility and making things faster, okay, which significantly reduces an indirect cost. So our my thought obviously would be working with the customers is there are digital layers, okay, and then having and digital tools at the right digital, having that process application will significantly yield a better efficiency and also improves customer delivery. Okay, so yes, Manoj, that's my point of view, Manoj.
Wrong, I think, if I'm not wrong, with all the digital tools and technologies that you just talked about, at various steps in this whole process, from the use of AI and ML technologies to be able to forecast the non-routines, which is a difficult part of forecasting, being able to provide the mobile apps in the hands of technicians, and then for them to be able to see the digital documents and be able to do the electronic signature and be able to create the certificates out of it, right? And lastly, a very important point you mentioned, the whole analytics. Once you are able to collect the not only structured data but also a lot of unstructured data in terms of videos and voice and other text fields on which analytics can be done, I think that becomes very powerful in terms of analysis of your non-routines down the road. And lastly, the collaboration and communication that you have with your customers, if that can also be part of this whole single system rather than having a separate emails and chats and phone calls, that again brings all the communication back in the context of the work orders or the customer orders that may be there, right? And I think, as you were saying, talking about this, sir, and I was just thinking about, again, tying back to the previous panel, that I think there were some questions around how do you bring excitement into this field of MROs in general and engine MROs? How do you attract talent, right? And as I was thinking through this, I mean, this is the place where the people in the 20s who are so used to using iPads, iPhones, and latest in technologies, how do you carve out a set of roles in the organization that is now actually looking at all these structured, unstructured data and starting to help with the analytics, create a role in the organization that now has potential to create value that you can use for improvement in their own business process, but also have some communications and analytics that you can provide to your customers. That's clearly a way to attract the newer talents, right? So maybe at this point, I also have Miguel on the call. Whatever we just talked about, this is something that is actually being implemented at one of the largest engine MROs in Europe, and Miguel is actually leading the whole implementation. And I would like him to bring a few nuggets out of those implementations. Miguel.
Thank you, Manoj. Yeah, I want to present some value enables from a real IT implementation project. Okay, I think that the topics that I was going to mention, they are related on how the technology can contribute to improve the TAT and to reduce the cost in an engine shop visit. Okay, the project that we are implementing is to support the core MRO processes in an engine shop, starting from engineering to maintenance execution and supply chain, but also support processes like finance, procurement, and some HR functions. Okay, I think that in order to bring some background of the project, I think that the company, as part of a digital transformation initiative, decide to move to a new ERP solution. Okay, the objective was to increase the business process efficiency and also to have a more productive workforce. That was the general objective of the process of the project. Of course, every division of the company, they have their own objectives aligned with the main one, and then focusing on the engine shop on the engine division. And talking to the engine director, I think that we could extract from this conversation that they wanted not only to reduce the operational TAT, which is really relevant for the customer, but they wanted also to reduce the complete order to cash TAT related to engine shop visit. That was the main message that she transmitted to me. Okay. And then regarding to this point, I have highlighted a couple of topics. I will select some of them because I think that you and Sarah and Mark, they told about some of them. So I will extract some points regarding 4 main areas. I will start with customer management, then I will jump to engineering and maintenance execution, and I will finalize with supply chain and cost controlling. And I think one of the topics, thinking on this order to cash, TAT reduction, I think we have 2 main topics here on the customer management side. One is the contract management, and the other one is the customer invoice. Okay, and regarding the customer contract, I think that in the contract we need to clearly define the work scope, the exclusion of the contract, the SLAs, and other customer requirements that could impact the production process. Okay, the objective at the end is to generate an accurate invoice. And coming back to the invoice, I think that one of the points that we are going to focus is on speed up the generation of the customer invoice, because at the end, what we want is a reduction of the financial leakage. Okay, and these are for me the 2 main areas where we are focusing in customer management related to a TAT improvement. If I jump to the engineering and maintenance execution, I think that you already mentioned topics like the improved visibility of the engines of visit, and also you talk about going paperless. I think is a key topic. But another point that I wanted to highlight related to maintenance execution is that an improved compliance control is required. Okay, I think that we need to ensure the modification level of the engine, and we need to avoid situations in which wrong parts are installed on the engine. That is the case, for example, if the customer does not accept PAM parts, we should not, or the system should be able to avoid the installation of PAM parts. Okay, for that, okay, we are implemented and improved an advanced part configuration control, but of course, this tracking of the parts to be installed on the aircraft is not also part of the configuration control. It's also part of the contract requirements that we need to meet. And finally, I would say that the objective with this improved compliance control is to prevent situations that could impact the gate 4 of the engines of visit, which is related to assembly and test and certification. And in order to finalize, I would highlight 2 topics. One on the supply chain area. Here, I think that we are focusing on the complete integration between operations and supply chain. Okay, as part of the repair process, a lot of part demands are going to be generated to the supply chain, and then the supply chain, they need to source the right part, the part according to a specification, and they need to communicate. They need to provide feedback to operation in order to see if everything goes well or if there is an impact on the supply chain. So there should be a close integration with the operations and the supply chain. And finally, I would say that regarding cost controlling, I think that we are going to control cost in real time, and the contract at the end will be our collector of cost and revenues. And at the end of the shop, we are going to be able to identify if our engine shop visit was profitable or not.
Thanks, Miguel. So clearly, I think, one of the key points that Miguel, I know there's a little bit of voice muffled there, so apologies for that. But I think the key point that he's trying to mention is that the turnaround time has to be looked more broadly than what the addition of all the steps leading up to, the contractual obligation. You as a business also have to look at your turnaround time, which is really, it's all about cash, right? From order, even for actually from quote quote to order to cash, the whole cycle. How do you optimize your own processes? How do you minimize the waiting times and other wastage in the time within your organization to be able to minimize that complete order to cash turnaround time for yourself, for your business, right? So at this point of time, maybe Mark, I'll ask you if you have any more comments from what Miguel and Saran presented from IT systems perspective with respect to cost, with respect to turnaround time.
My last comment would be just that, just make sure that you're making an investment in your systems. You need to follow that investment up with an organization that will take action and take advantage so you get your return on that investment. So thank you all.